Welcome to the Mini Book Podcast. This is where we take the source material you send us, some really fascinating stuff, and we pull out the key insights.
Yeah, the surprising bits, but, keep it engaging.
Exactly. So today we're diving into how the U.S. government ticks and the people behind it.
Now, we've got great sources from The Learner, excerpts from Michael Lewis on public service.
Right, and also a piece by Dave Eggers that touches on space exploration, among other things.
A really interesting mix.
Totally. So our mission here is to look beyond the usual political noise.
Find those unexpected stories, right? Commitment, crucial work people don't often see.
That's the plan. Okay, let's jump in.
So the first thing from Lewis that really hits you is this contrast. How so? Well, people have really strong opinions on politics, right? Everyone does. But then there's this, surprising lack of knowledge about how the government actually works. Day-to-day stuff.
Uses that example, the Agriculture Department.
Exactly. Their role in keeping rural America going. It's huge, but who thinks about it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else is, operating under the radar.
Totally. And Lewis didn't just stop there. He really went deep.
Auditing different departments, right?
Yeah. Energy. He got briefed on the nuclear stockpile. Imagine that.
Wow.
And commerce. Learning about big steps forward in weather prediction.
So it wasn't just isolated pockets.
Not at all. He found these just incredibly dedicated people doing vital work everywhere, in places most of us honestly probably never consider.
And that led to his book, The Fifth Risk.
Right, which kind of took off unexpectedly. It suggests people are actually hungry for this stuff.
Yeah, understanding government beyond just the political theater.
But why is it so hidden? Why don't we hear more about this essential work?
Lewis points to a few things, it seems.
Like the media landscape changing?
Yeah. Less money for that really deep, long-form reporting that could actually show what these agencies do.
Makes sense. And then there's the government PR angle.
Always seems focused on putting out fires, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's damage control.
Not so much on proactively saying, hey, look at this important thing we're doing.
And maybe it's the people themselves. Public servants often aren't looking for the spotlight.
Driven by the mission, not the fame.
Yeah, it's like this whole hidden world. The Partnership for Public Service tries to highlight them.
But it's tough even getting nominations for their awards, apparently.
Yet when you do hear the stories, it's amazing.
Like those FBI agents solving the Birmingham bombing after decades. Incredible dedication. Or the CDC doctor wiping out polio in India. Just massive impact. Or that Energy Department person cleaning up that nuclear waste dump.
Oh yeah, the one who finished 60 years early.
And $30 billion under budget. And now it's a park.
That's wild. It reminds me of that Lewis analogy.
The carrots in the school play.
Exactly, doing all the real work backstage.
While the politicians are out front taking the credit or, assigning blame.
It really makes you pause. We focus so much on a few political figures.
When there are millions of federal employees doing this critical, sometimes life-saving work.
Yeah, it shifts your perspective.
Speaking of dedication, let's talk about Chris.
The coal miner turned government engineer. That's a fascinating story, Lewis tells.
It really is. Such a powerful example of, bringing real-world experience into finding solutions.
His journey is pretty compelling. Started with workers' rights.
Right, but then shifted hard towards safety after actually working in the mines while studying. He saw the risks firsthand.
And the stats were grim back then.
Yeah, 200 deaths a year in coal mining, even with rules in place. And half were roof collapses.
So working in government was a very deliberate choice for him.
Definitely. He felt the industry itself maybe wasn't prioritizing safety research enough, profit motives and all that.
He saw a need for impartial work.
Exactly. So he took his hands-on knowledge and combined it with, analytical skills.
Bringing statistics into rock engineering. That was his big innovation, right?
Pretty much. That field usually focused more on, load and deformation principles.
So the data was there, but no one was looking at it statistically.
Right. Mines collected tons of safety data. But Chris was the one who started digging for patterns, for trends. He filled that gap.
And that led to his stability factor.
Which, amazingly, the industry engineers adopted pretty widely.
Even though they hadn't done the research themselves. That's interesting.
It really is. It shows how practical analysis from someone with direct experience can unlock things maybe pure theory misses.
And he kept going, didn't he? Looking at geology.
Yeah, how different rock formations affected roof stability. And he even borrowed a test.
The ball-peen hammer thing.
Yeah.
From the Agriculture Department.
Used for checking rocks in national forests. He repurposed it for mines. Talk about thinking outside the box.
That's pretty clever. And then there was that whole mystery about horizontal stress.
Right. In deep mines, the sideways pressure could be even stronger than the weight from above. Miners knew it happened.
but no solid theory explained it.
And Chris, again with his stats, dug into the casualty reports, the accident details.
What did he find?
That injuries were happening even where the support pillars seemed okay. It wasn't just about the roof caving in.
So the old focus was too narrow.
Exactly. It shows the power of just looking at the data fresh. Rigorously analyzing it can reveal these hidden factors.
Okay, so moving from the physical dangers.
To something more abstract, but just as vital.
Right. Perpetual care, memory, respect. Let's talk about Ronald E. Walters and the National Cemetery Administration, another Lewis profile.
What's striking there is the profound equality.
In the national cemeteries.
Yeah, doesn't matter if you were a general or a private, everyone gets the same honor, the same dignity.
And the NCA under Walters handles everything.
Everything. Burials, upkeep, records for nearly 4 million veterans, across 155 cemeteries. It's a massive, unwavering commitment.
Walters himself, Lewis paints quite a picture.
Serene, easygoing apparently, but underneath this obsessive drive for excellence.
And his staff love him, high satisfaction ratings.
Yeah, his background seems key. Dad was Coast Guard and a machine specialist. Mom, a federal secretary.
So service and hard work were ingrained early.
Seems like it. He admired athletes known for grit, team play, like Billy Kilmer, Chris Evert, always focused on improvement.
They called him an exasperatingly good student.
Huh. Yeah, just that intense work ethic. He came up through the VA doing various projects.
And saw ways to improve the cemetery system.
Exactly. He led this big assessment, helped unify things, moved them from being sort of independent islands
towards being more data-driven, aligned with the VA.
Right. Paying attention to the details, even small things that impact families.
And his leadership style, intuitive, collaborative.
Very much so. Lots of feedback, those blue sheet to-do lists. He even chose a smaller office.
Real servant leadership.
Totally. And what's really impressive is his nonpartisan focus. 7 administrations respected him.
Always about serving the public, not politics.
That's the picture Lewis paints. Colleagues praise his character, his sense of purpose, his ability to just get things done without fuss.
The inertia machine comment.
Yeah, meant in the best way, like a quiet, steady force, and his push for more cemeteries so veterans could be buried near home.
That shows real practical empathy.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just a 9-to-5 thing for him.
First in, last out kind of guy. Enjoyed mentoring.
Seems so. He even found inspiration in St. Ignatius of Loyola. The idea of personal inventory, continuous improvement.
Lewis clearly admires him deeply, wants to be more like him.
You get that sense. And that final thought from Lewis.
About perpetual care.
Yeah, that it's not just for cemeteries, it's a principle for everything we do, striving for excellence, always improving.
That's powerful. Okay, let's shift gears dramatically now.
From the earthbound to out there.
Space. Dave Eggers' piece on NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, and this idea that finding life elsewhere isn't sci-fi anymore.
It feels almost imminent. Eggers points out this near certainty, maybe in the next 25 years, of finding evidence of life on another planet.
Because the tech has gotten so good. Telescopes, ways to block starlight.
Exactly. Things like the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, designed specifically to hunt exoplanets, and the upcoming Habitable Worlds Observatory.
Huge potential discoveries, but Eggers notes it's not exactly front-page news every day.
Kind of strange, isn't it? Meanwhile, JPL is buzzing. He calls it Disneyland for nerds.
Huh? I like that. And he introduces us to Vanessa Bailey.
Right. Her story's great. Grew up in rural South Dakota, super dark skies, inspired by Nova.
And now she discovers exoplanets.
Yeah? And with billions of planets just in our galaxy, the odds of life somewhere seem pretty high, right? Even microbial life.
She actually saw one directly. That's rare, isn't it?
Very rare. Most are found indirectly by how they affect their star's light.
And the big challenge is finding Earth-like ones in the Goldilocks zone.
Right, where liquid water could exist, but the star's glare makes spotting the planet incredibly hard.
Which is where coronagraphs come in.
Basically, yeah. Tech to block the star's light so you can see the faint planet next to it. It's been around in concept for ages, but getting much, much better. Like the one on the Roman telescope. Exactly, a huge leap. And Bailey's take on finding life. It's interesting. What did she think? That it would be humbling, Maybe hopeful. Take some pressure off humanity being the only special thing.
That's a cool perspective. Eggers also mentions more women at JPL now.
Yeah, a definite shift from the old NASA image. And he rightly credits Nancy Grace Roman.
The mother of Hubble.
Mm-hmm. She pushed for space telescopes way back. Even floated the coronagraph idea in 1959.
Wow, visionary.
Totally. And even with these huge ambitions, Eggers stresses how careful they are with taxpayer money.
Lots of budget meetings, making sure things are on track.
Seems so. Real responsibility. He also mentions the alternative tech, the starshade.
Like a giant deployable sunflower in space?
Sort of. Flies separately from the telescope to block the light. It's another approach.
And we meet Nick Siegler, inspired by Carl Sagan.
Right. Changed careers to do astrophysics. And Kim Aaron, a longtime JPL engineer working on things like the starshade.
So 2 competing ways to block starlight, coronagraph versus starshade.
Yeah, and right now, the coronagraph has some practical advantages. Easier to test and deploy, though Siegler seems intrigued by the starshade's potential.
Siegler's comment about NASA being in the inspiration business?
That really lands, doesn't it? Connects back to those childhood dreams driving everyone there.
Okay. From the vastness of space, let's zoom back in, way in.
2 government statistics. Sounds less inspiring, huh?
Maybe, yeah. But Lewis makes the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, surprisingly fascinating and critical.
Right, it's not just dry numbers. Lewis emphasizes just how much data the U.S. government collects on everything.
He uses that wild statistic about deaths from falls versus firearms in 2020.
Yeah, nearly equal for older Americans. It shows how raw data can mislead if you don't know the context.
Because the apparent rise in falls wasn't necessarily more falling.
It was a change in how deaths were recorded. The classification system changed.
Which proves his point. You gotta understand how the numbers are made.
Absolutely. And among all this data, he singles out the census and the CPI as these huge, effort-intensive, always controversial made numbers.
And the CPI's impact is enormous. Social Security, SNMP benefits, pensions, tax brackets.
Contracts, wage deals, it touches almost everything.
And the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, their process is intense.
Super detailed, figuring out the basket of goods and services, then tracking prices monthly using sampling. They can't check every price everywhere.
And the basket changes over time, right? To reflect what people actually buy.
Yeah, and they recognize different groups experience inflation differently. That's why there's CPIW and CPIU.
And then there's substitution.
Right, people switching to cheaper stuff when prices rise. It makes the CPI complex.
So it rarely matches any one person's experience perfectly.
Especially for lower-income folks who might see higher inflation on essentials like food and fuel, even if those are a smaller part of the overall index.
We had that long, stable period, the Great Moderation.
But things have gone kind of haywire since 2020, Lewis notes. Big jumps in basics.
Which brings politics into it, criticizing the BLS, claiming manipulation.
Yeah, Lewis thinks some skepticism comes from the psychological punch of food prices going up.
Even if food is a smaller slice of the CPI pie than, say, housing.
Right, but ultimately Lewis argues you need a broad measure like CPI, even if imperfect.
Because the alternative is flying blind economically.
Exactly. He frames the whole debate as maybe part of a bigger shift away from objective truth.
Towards personal experience, distrusting data.
Potentially. And he warns against ditching the effort to create these big picture metrics.
Yeah.
Could lead to a less informed society.
It raises that fundamental question, doesn't it? How do we maintain trust in shared data?
It's a huge challenge for any complex society, for sure.
Okay, let's have it again, to a group that often gets, well, a lot of flack.
IRS criminal investigation.
Yeah, Lewis points out how damaging that broad anti-government talk can be.
Like the shrink it till you can sink it idea. It hits morale, public perception.
And the attacks on IRS-CI, the criminal investigation part, can be particularly harsh and inaccurate.
Even though they're only about 3% of the IRS workforce.
Commissioner Werfel voiced frustration about resources, even basic stuff like ammo for training.
Really shows the pressure they're under. Eggers then introduces Jared Koopman,
head of cyber and forensics for IRS-CI. Fascinating background.
Yeah, family and military and police, good at math, accounting major. But his wife was surprised by his career choice.
Didn't fit the accountant or the cop stereotype.
Exactly. He got interested after hearing about another student's IRS internship. Saw a way to combine numbers and law enforcement.
Started out on traditional white-collar stuff, investment fraud.
Right, but then talking with another agent, Chris Janchevsky.
They saw the potential for crime in crypto early on.
Really early. They were proactive, even bought some Bitcoin just to figure it out. Shows real foresight.
And the irony is crypto's transparency.
The blockchain ledger, yeah. While it seems anonymous, it can actually help investigators trace money.
Which led Koopman to build the cybercrime unit basically from scratch.
Building a castle out of toothpicks, as Eggers puts it, and the work they do.
Tracing digital money trails, finding patterns, unmasking criminals.
Eggers gives some huge examples, taking down Silk Road.
Recovering billions in stolen Bitcoin.
And that awful welcome dash to dash video dash case. Child exploitation material. Their work directly led to rescuing victims.
Just underscores the impact. These are dedicated, skilled people.
Lifelong civil servants, often unseen. And Koopman has to be careful talking about methods.
Because the criminals adapt constantly. Now they're dealing with the metaverse, too.
Always evolving. The Binance investigation is another example of their ingenuity.
Using things like public AWS help desk records. Clever.
Yeah, and finding internal messages showing Binance knew about money laundering on their platform.
Meanwhile, Commissioner Werfel is pushing modernization, using tech better.
Right, improving service for regular taxpayers, but also getting better at finding high-income non-filers.
His comment about government's quiet, pervasive impact is telling.
Really is, and Koopman's final thought.
About flying under the radar being an advantage.
Yeah, sometimes it's better if the bad guys underestimate you. It's a unique perspective on quiet effectiveness.
It really does highlight these hidden defenders of the system.
Working hard without the headlines. Okay, where next?
Let's talk about accessibility, democracy, and archives.
The National Archives and Records Administration, NARA Array.
Exactly. Sarah Vowell's piece digs into how their mission is evolving. It's not just about protecting old documents anymore.
It's about actively promoting openness. Access for everyone, strengthening democracy that way.
NARA was founded back in 1934, but responsibilities grew. FOIA, presidential records.
A huge mandate, and Eggers introduces Pamela Wright, who's leading the charge on digitization.
Her Montana background is key to her perspective, right?
Totally. Understanding the need to connect all Americans wherever they are to their history via these federal records.
Digitizing billions of records isn't just technical.
It's about making a more perfect union real, democratizing access.
Her own background, working class, researching tribal water rights.
It gave her insight into how imposing federal buildings can feel. Digital access breaks down that barrier.
She and Katherine Branson talk about that balance.
Yeah.
The romance of originals versus the practicality of digital copies.
Yeah, making the archives accessible in your pocket, as Wright says. Moving beyond a gatekeeper model.
And Wright keeps a low profile herself despite her impact, like Mike Mansfield.
That Montana sensibility, maybe? NARA partners with genealogy sites, too, to speed things up. Resourceful.
Wright's Montana rancher mindset. Stewardship of resources that belong to the people.
And the range of records is just staggering. Jesse Owens' photo, Bell's patent, election results.
You could find evidence for almost any perspective in there.
Right, and History Hub, their online Kiwanda platform.
People ask everything, genealogy, specific historical events. You used it yourself.
I did. Researching Air Force crews training for the Berlin airlift in Montana. It's incredibly useful.
And those stories from archivists, people finding family on census records.
So emotional. It makes history deeply personal. The 1950 census is full of that. Famous people next to everyday folks.
Wright's own parents are in the 1950 census for Montana.
Yeah, powerful personal connection for her, linking her to her past, her parents.
Her metaphor about life being like a combined tilling soil.
Bringing each life into the light for a moment, beautiful and poignant.
Standing in the vault next to that first law signed by Washington and Adams.
Requiring the oath to uphold the Constitution. It connects right back to Wright's own oath as a federal employee.
Underscores the deep responsibility NARA holds in preserving the foundations.
Truly vital work, often unseen.
Okay, finally, let's look towards the future. A new generation entering public service.
Through your goddaughter, Olivia Renberg going, starting at the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and her initial take is really positive, which is great to hear.
Though the DOJ is understandably cautious about media given the political climate.
Right, the whole deep state narrative makes things sensitive, but Olivia's family reaction was kind of funny.
Not quite the cops, but also not the cops. Captures the ambiguity, maybe.
Exactly, and she found her niche in antitrust, but her background is so formative.
Raised by two white lesbian moms, Portland, Maine, then Oakland, for diversity.
Yeah, experiencing different kinds of visibility and community. Connecting with her birth mom, learning about incarcerated relatives.
Broadened her view of America's inequities. And Oakland's political history, Black Panthers, BLM.
It all shaped her desire to make a difference. Eggers makes that analogy.
Young people moving to D.C. for government jobs today like they moved to Detroit for factory jobs before.
Yeah, which leads to the question, why antitrust? How does that connect to civil rights for her?
She explains it simply. Laws against monopolies help consumers. A monopoly is just controlling too much of a market.
And Eggers brings in Kathy O'Neill, an antitrust lawyer, for more context.
Right, she explains the key laws, Sherman Act, Clayton Act, FTC Act, and the roles of DOJ and FTC.
O'Neill's favorite case, the Atan-DT breakup in the 80s.
A classic example. showed how breaking up a monopoly led to more choice, innovation, lower prices for consumers.
And current examples like the FTC suit over prescription drug prices.
Keeps it relevant. Eggers also includes Luke Thomas from MMA Media,
Talking about UFC fighter pay as a potential antitrust issue, lack of competition.
It's a provocative angle. Fighters sued, alleging wage theft, predatory contracts. UFC settled some cases, but Thomas argues they still dominate the market.
Then there's Max Stier from the Partnership for Public Service.
Yeah, advocating for attracting good talent to government, ensuring good leadership, a nonpartisan champion for effective government.
He talks about the DOJ paralegal program, started specifically to bring in motivated grads like Olivia.
Shows deliberate efforts to build that talent pipeline.
And that hypothetical question Eggers poses, fire 50,000 federal workers on day one.
Everyone, Olivia, Luke, Kathy, Max, reacts negatively, highlighting the disruption, the loss of expertise, the nonpartisan nature of most jobs.
But the kicker for Olivia, personally,
Is the law school debt a huge factor in her future career path?
it really lays bare a systemic problem, doesn't it? How do we make public service truly viable for talented people carrying that debt?
Eggers' final thought is powerful. If the system can't attract and keep someone like Olivia, who wants to serve, then maybe the system needs fixing.
Yeah, a critical point about investing in the future of public service.
Absolutely, which brings us maybe unexpectedly to our last story.
A really tough one.
Yeah.
Deeply personal. Lewis again telling the story of Walter and Amanda Smith and their daughter Elena.
And her battle with that terrifying brain-eating amoeba Balamuthia.
Set against the backdrop of their own marriage difficulties.
Yeah, Elena's symptoms started subtly. Headaches, vision issues, school trouble, initially misdiagnosed.
Until the devastating news, Balamuthia. Rare, deadly, no clear treatment, grim prognosis.
Just unimaginable. And this is where Heather Stone at the FDA comes in.
Her job was specifically to help doctors find treatments for rare diseases.
A crucial role, but challenging. Navigating bureaucracy, getting permission to talk, facing skepticism sometimes.
She created that website, the app, to connect doctors globally on rare diseases, repurposed drugs.
A fantastic idea to break down silos. But faced hurdles, participation, legal issues in some countries, misinformation.
Then there's Joe DeRisi at UCSF, a brilliant researcher.
Yeah, studying nitroxyline for amoebas. He's known for solving medical mysteries with DNA analysis, identifying weird pathogens.
And he saw the same problem. Heather did no central place to share rare disease knowledge, knew about her solo efforts.
They eventually connected, and when DeRisi needed emergency FDA approval to use nitroxyline for a patient.
He called Heather and she helped him navigate the process.
Right, changing his view of the FDA from a hurdle to a help in her case.
Meanwhile, Elena was on the standard CDC drug cocktail.
Yeah.
With terrible side effects.
Just awful. So the parents started desperately searching online themselves.
And Amanda's mom found DeRisi's paper on nitroxyline.
But the local doctors, even at a top hospital, didn't know about it. Shows the communication gap.
So Amanda used LinkedIn to reach the researchers directly.
Incredible persistence. Faced with Elena getting worse, they made that incredibly tough call.
Stop the standard drugs, try nitroxyline.
And the turnaround was dramatic. She started improving, eventually recovered fully. It felt like a miracle.
And the crisis transformed the parents' marriage, too.
Brought them back together. That phone call Walter made to Amanda asking if he was a good man, so raw.
They were grateful for all the support, but Amanda worried.
About other families without those resources, that support network, what happens to them?
And the story ends with this paradox, right? Olena's miracle recovery.
Also revealed a massive system failure. A promising treatment existed, discovered nearby.
But the connection wasn't made easily or quickly, despite Heather Stone's tool designed for exactly that.
Luce's final line is chilling. Society has the mechanism to save itself, but maybe a built-in rule against using it.
And tragically, Heather's work wasn't leveraged in another similar case nearby either.
It just screams for better communication, faster knowledge sharing in medicine and regulation.
So wrapping up this mini-book podcast, wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
For sure, from the dedication inside government agencies.
To the complexities of measuring things like inflation.
The drive to explore space.
And the power of individuals fighting against huge obstacles, personal and systemic.
Hopefully for the learner, this hit the mark. Those surprising insights, that quick but thorough understanding.
Yeah, we hope it gave you those aha moments without feeling like drinking from a fire hose.
And for all of you listening, maybe it leaves you with this thought.
Consider those unseen systems, those hidden figures that keep things running.
How much do we really know about them? And what other hidden forces shape our world deserving a closer look?
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Mini Book Podcast. We've journeyed from coal mines to the cosmos, from federal cemeteries to antitrust law.
Yeah, and through it all, one theme kept showing up. Quiet dedication. People working behind the scenes, often unnoticed, making things better for everyone.
If today's episode gave you a new way of seeing things, about government, service, or even your own role in society, then mission accomplished.
And if you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear this. We're back soon with more insights from powerful, thought-provoking stories.
Until then, stay curious.